Dorothy Cook, welcome to the show. How are you today?
We're good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I am glad to hear it, and I'm glad to have you here as well. Excited to dive into the depths of our topic of conversation today. But before we do, can you give the listeners a bit of context about who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure. I have been in the field of helping people like a coach, counselor for over 33 years. I've stopped counting. So currently, the last decade, I've been working with people more on stress in the limbic system, body awareness, that kind of thing. So it's been my joy and delight to watch people quickly shift. And yeah, I'm just really excited to talk about it today.
Likewise, and I'm particularly fascinated about what takes people to the paths that they end up going on. So you can explain a little bit about what took you to that path exactly to start helping people?
So I had a major health crisis in my early 40s, and it was a direct result of me ignoring my stress. I did not know how to deal with it. I grew up knowing how to work hard, and you just push past tiredness, you push past anything just to get the job done. I came out of a farmer family. And we had a great work ethic, which has traveled with me all my life. But that's really what took me down because I was not listening to what my body was saying. So, for example, in the beginning of my health crisis, I started getting more tired, but hey, everybody gets tired, you minimize, you deny, and you push through. And then I began to make some mistakes at work that normally I would not make because I'm very, very good at what I do. I was not self-employed at that time. I worked for somebody else. And then my eating had to change because I was becoming allergic to all the foods that I was eating. And I had to be careful going down the aisles in the grocery stores because the detergents would set off a migraine. Like it was just progressively getting worse and worse. I could see it, but again, you just go, okay, this is part of life. People get sick, and you minimize, you deny until you get a wake up call. And that wake up call came at work when I did make a fatal administration error that caused them to lose a fair bit of money, and it put a notice on my file. I didn't lose my job over it, but I knew that the writing was on the wall. That really was my wake up call in that moment.
And where do you think you'd be today if you didn't have that wake up call?
Oh, dear me. Well, when my health crashed, I was flat on my back, sleeping 20 hours out of 24. And I did that probably for the first 3 months. I think I'd still be walking in the same old patterns, which is don't listen to what my body is saying and just push through. So now I still have a high work ethic, but I'm listening. So for example, yesterday, which is really rare, but I needed to take a nap and I did. But I have the luxury of being able to do it being self-employed. It's just I'm making decisions that are a lot wiser. So if my body is feeling stressed and screaming at me, it doesn't have to scream anymore. I listen a lot sooner and I course correct. So if we put it on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 would be that screaming, my body is hurting. I'm listening at 5 and below, so when it starts to tell me something, I make different choices. I take that break. I stretch my muscles out. I go for a walk or just do what I need to do in order to keep pulling it down, keeping it at very low levels. Because we all have stress. We can't get away from it, especially these days, but how we handle it, that's the critical issue.
And at that stage in your life, did you have any outlets at all? Did you have any ways of managing your stress? I know that you mentioned that you had some tiredness, but you just worked through it. But did you have anything that you did where you were like, okay, this is a good stress reliever for me? Even sometimes people are not so proactive about it, but they're like, I go out for runs because they clear my head and I feel 10 times better after letting off that energy, for example. Did you have anything like that in place, or was it kind of completely go, 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 ignore any signals or red flags?
Well, I did have some things in place. I had friends that I could go out with. I had a couple of pets that I could interact with, but it really was not making the right choices. So yes, they were available, but I didn't step into them the way that I should have. And that was critical. So yeah, they were there, but I wasn't doing anything really with them.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is because I want people to kind of resonate with your story, because a lot of people maybe think, well, I'm working hard. I sometimes ignore these signals from time to time, but I've got this and I do this. So it should be keeping me balanced. However, that wasn't necessarily enough for you in the way that you mentioned that you weren't kind of using those to the degree that you needed to. So take me to this point of recovery. You're spending 20 hours a day sleeping, which I can only imagine what that was like, both physically and mentally. So where do you go from there in terms of saying, okay, well, this is what my body needs right now, and this is the path back to somewhat of normality that I've been missing for decades potentially?
So I'm gonna talk in two parts. So the first part is as I began to get better, I began to get out and walk, but I used to walk like a little 99-year-old lady as I am learning to walk around a single block. That's all I could do when I first started. From there, you keep walking, you build up your strength, you change your dietary, you do, you have I started actually into art. And that really was, I never knew I was an artist, but I have an amazing eye to be able to recreate, not create from scratch, but recreate. It's quite amazing what I did back then. So that was just the normal pathway that most people would walk, and I walked it out in practical, healthy ways. I got support from, I went into counseling and I worked on some emotional issues. Changed the dietary, as I said before. I even worked on some spiritual issues, which is a little wacko, but it works, That's my belief system. But I want to jump fast forward to 20 years later. This was the missing piece. So the doctors could never diagnose what had gone wrong with me. They could acknowledge what had happened, but they could never find the source of it. Okay. And someone handed me a book, and I'm reading this book and I'm going, oh, this is my story. And what the story was about was my limbic system in my brain had gone rogue. And what I mean by rogue is that it began to be overreactive. So if you think of a car engine that's never shutting off, it's getting hot, it's causing damage. That's what it was doing to my body. The issue wasn't so much the physical health issues, it was how my brain was handling stressors. It didn't know how to shut off. And so that for me was the critical thing. So I never got to use that tool when I personally was healing, but I use it now in so many other people's lives, and I get such quick recovery when it is a limbic system.
Yeah, it's fascinating once you open up that door into things that you never really realized existed. And do you think a big part of why you couldn't navigate that stress was the maybe repressed issues that you had growing up that you hadn't dealt with? Was that what manifested into the challenges that you had? Because again, a lot of people probably relate, they're like, okay, I have a lot of stress, I have a lot going on and everything along those lines. Is that the path that I'm going to end up on? Or what do you think it's down to? Do you think it's that each individual person has a different stress tolerance, or do you think it's down to the fact that we've not worked through certain issues and that becomes overwhelming, and then that limbic system issue happens to us off the back of not navigating those things or never learning how to switch off? Where do you think it stems from, so people can be aware of those potential warning signs or even get in front of them so they don't even have to go through them?
I'm going to share a name. This medical doctor's name is Gabor Mate. Mate is Mate, and it's called When the Body Says No, the Hidden Causes of Stress. He was mainline medical, and he used to not think that the emotional played into the physical. Well, he now is alarming, making the alarm sounds out there going, your emotions affect your health. In fact, he said in the book multiple times, repressed emotions is the greatest factor in whether or not you are going to have a disease issue, like a chronic health issue. So for me, I repressed my emotions. I grew up in a family where we had fun together, but we didn't share hearts together. And it was a good family, but we just never got down to the depths, and so for me, I didn't know how to get angry because in my upbringing, I didn't know how to get angry. We just didn't do that. That's part of my family. I know some people are thinking that's really weird. But I remember a professor of mine, when I was training to be a therapist, he said, I forget what the question was, but I said, I have the perfect family. And this stunned look on his face, because in my mind, I was overbalanced on the positive. But Gabor Mate talks about how some people, they will remember all the positives and others will remember all the negatives. So really there's a balance that is needed. We need to keep working and acknowledge what we're feeling. And the good news is if you have repressed a lot of emotions or haven't processed them, it's never too late to start. Never. In fact, if you have a chronic illness, based on his research as well as many others, you can hold at bay, or even, somebody's going to crown me for saying reverse, But the body is designed to heal and repair itself, and you take the pressure cooker off of it. So it, like that car engine, if you tune it down, if you cool it off, it starts working the way it was supposed to. Well, that's your body. So it's never too late. Repressed emotions is a huge, huge factor for the healing process. But it's, again, I want to say it so people hear it. It's never too late to start. And if you work on your stuff, you never have to go into a health crisis. In fact, the genetics is not the issue. Why do smokers, some smokers who are chronic smokers never get cancer? Because genetics isn't the issue. It's what's coming at you with the stress and how you handle it that becomes the deciding factor if your body goes into some kind of major disease.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I actually spoke to someone a little while ago, maybe about a year ago on this podcast, who spoke about cancer being reversible and many factors that impact that, and mainly down to stress more so than anything else. It was a fascinating conversation, actually. So yeah, you're not the first person to say that. I'm sure you won't be the last either. But coming back to the repressed memories idea, obviously the fact of the matter is that they're repressed. And many times, maybe someone like yourself who was very much highlighting the positive and thought that they had this perfect family, doesn't even know that they are, or they had, I should say, these issues that they weren't even aware of. So, I mean, the first question I have is like, first, if you're not aware of them, how do you bring them to the surface? And B, if you are aware of them, you repress them for a reason, because they were uncomfortable, they were unsafe, they were potentially horrendous as well. So how do we find the courage, I should say, to actually work through those repressed emotions in that situation where we're aware of them, but we buried them deep for a reason?
Person number one that you talked about, the one that does not recognize, you cannot deal with what you don't recognize. So they are the ones that are going to go into health crisis. And in fact, there was one disease that Gabor Mate, the doctor in the book, he talked about. He says there's one disease that unless the person is super nice, they know they don't have that diagnosis. They are super nice. That's one of the characteristics of the disease. And those are people that have been thinking positively all their life, but they have done it to the degree that they're not in balance and they're in denial or minimizing the negative. All right. That can actually set you up for disease. All right. Person number two that you talked about, statistics show, or research shows, that unless you have one person that's safe for you, you will not be able to work on your stuff. I know when someone comes in to work with me, if they have no support system outside of myself, I know that they will not be able to make any major shifts. They can't. They need somebody to talk to. And in fact, one of the other really neat statistics that's out there is your psychiatrists, psychologists, people like myself. I'm not one of those with that title, but that are in a listening profession, we're less effective than the neighbor across the street or the family member who's got a listening ear. If you have somebody on a regular basis that you can talk to, they don't have to be professional. You can actually move through your stuff very nicely. Now, it's not just about puking and being negative. It's actually learning from it, bringing some kind of resolve. And that's the work that I do with the brain, is I help the brain to bring a resolve to the issue in the limbic area. The limbic is the emotional area, the fight, flight, or freeze. You need to be able to bring resolve and healing to it to be able to move on. Otherwise, you just keep tripping over the same trip wire. If it's rejection or abandonment or, whatever it is, you're going to keep filtering your hearing through that system, and you'll keep coming across it all the time.
But that's the challenge with these people who are overly nice, right? They start to think that they're a burden, and they think, well, I don't want to lay all of my problems on other people, because of then I'm so used to just holding everything in and not expressing this. And the time that I do, what I don't want to do is then put my negativity on other people. And like you said, you don't have to lay it all out there and just kind of use them as an emotional trash can. But at the same time, it can feel like you're doing that if it's the very first time you've opened up. So how do you get your nice people to overcome that?
Really good question. So let me just back up a little bit. Ages 0 to 6 is the foundation for the rest of your life. You build pathways in your brain that you travel in terms of behavior and the ability to do things. So that's how you know how to tie your shoe, brush your teeth, all those wonderful things. Well, the same with emotions. There's been patterns within family dynamics. So for example, in my family, they shut down anger. You could feel everything else but anger. If we go back generationally, there was some pretty severe anger that came from my grandfather's side. So my mother married a good British man who didn't get angry,
I
okay?
can relate with that.
Um, but it brought us out of balance. So Gabor Mate, which is really interesting, he talks about how we know medically that things go from generation to generation, like diabetes, cancer. There's more propensity to go there. But he is saying it's because of the pattern of the interaction of families are very similar going generation to generation. And that's why you keep seeing the patterns of the health issues. So he's saying it's a direct relationship to the pattern of the interaction. So in order to answer your question, you have to really look at patterns and begin to make a conscious decision to change patterns. You don't need to, and you don't want to try and change everything at once. But if you recognize that something isn't healthy, or maybe you want to be a little bolder, or maybe you need to be, shut up more, maybe you're just always puking, with anger or emotion and you're pushing people away. That's self-protection. The quiet person who doesn't want to share, well, they learned that growing up. They learned to be a caretaker. They learned that their needs weren't appropriate. They learned that it wasn't safe to share their stuff. So they have to undo the belief systems in order to change the pattern that they interact with. And working with somebody that understands family dynamics is really critical, because if you want to look at the parallels that are running, what works for you, what doesn't for you, and then find one thing, just one thing that you can begin to change, and you will begin to shift.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think it's all about not thinking that you need to do it all at once either. Your neighbor doesn't have to be the person you now have to speak to 30 minutes a day every single day, right? You might start with a therapist or a coach or a psychologist, and that's where you might do a lot of your emotional dumping. And that's probably quite a safe and relevant place to do that. And then once you've kind of gotten the edge off of it a little bit, then you might be able to then go into that situation, be able to discuss, but not feel like you're kind of just piling it on like you might need to, because you've never done it before, with a therapist or psychologist or a life coach, for example, as well. So that makes a lot of sense. And something that you said that I found quite interesting is you said the brain doesn't forget anything. I've not heard that too much. So what did you mean by that exactly?
So everything that you've gone through in your entire existence, the brain retains. It doesn't forget. But what
That's
happens
a
is,
scary thought, isn't it?
it is a scary thought. This is why there's tripwires emotionally for you, because when people repress it, when they minimize or deny it, your brain it's still programmed into. It's kind of like AI today. It takes, it knows everything that you've ever said, and it's going to bring it back to you, and it recognizes your voice and your pattern and all that kind of thing. Well, that's the brain. It really is the brain. So that's another reason why you want to begin to change some of the pathways. And that's the cool thing, is you can change them quite easily if you know how to change them. But if you, and you don't have to go through a lot of trauma and years of working through emotions. So when I went through my healing process, it was more of an inner healing, work through the emotions and that kind of thing. But the work that I do today, working with the brain, you don't have to go through the depths of pain. You want to work with a memory, but you change it so the brain can release it. So if it's okay with you, I'd just like to talk a little bit about how to change it at the brain level. So the limbic system, the emotional system, okay, back deep within your brain, is trying to do two things. It's trying to keep you safe, and it's trying to solve the problem. So you don't have to go into inner healing. You just have to help this part of the brain that contains the trauma or the emotion to change the messaging. The message says, I need to be safe and I have solved the problem. All right. But the really interesting thing about this process is we're using the part of the brain up here at the front, okay, which is the smart brain, it knows the truth, it knows time, it knows facts and details. Well, the limbic system doesn't. It doesn't tell time. And that's why athletes can use imagery to see themselves winning and being on that podium with the gold medal when they've never done it before, because you're building up a belief system within your brain. You're changing the pathways in your brain to say a different message, and you will go where your pathways are been built up. So If you believe from childhood that you're no good, that you're a loser, or nothing ever good will come your way, you will literally walk out that belief system because the brain is taking you where you believe. But if you change the messaging, if you just simply choose to change the messaging, you cannot do it just with mantras, with verbal mantras. I'm a winner, I'm a winner, I'm a winner. Doesn't, it will not change your brain. I guarantee it. You have to use a verbal mantra with a picture and convince your brain, that emotional part of your brain, that it is real, that you are a winner, and you see it with and feel it and taste it with all your five senses. When you convince your brain of that, your brain will believe it and move you in that direction. That is the key.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And I think that the couple of things that come to my mind before we allow that to manifest and marinate in people's minds. So I think it could be an amazing thing, but I want to bring up a few doubts that I know my listeners are probably screaming back out at their phones and their headphones, is that, well, if I start to manifest that in my mind, I'm visualizing where I am, what stops the front part of the brain from kicking in and saying, well, actually, you have no basis in reality of that happening, right? I get this a lot with my health and fitness clients, right? They always come to me and they're like, well, no one's ever been healthy in my family before, or I've never had any success with my health and fitness. So what makes me think I can do it this time? And there's no grip on reality. So they might have this fantastic idea and vision of where they might want to be, but then reality suggests that, well, actually, this is not the case because no one in your family has done it. You have certainly not done it. And if anything, you've actually had a lot of failed attempts, quote unquote, right? I never see it as a failed attempt unless they stop, but that's what they tell me. So what can you do about allowing kind of the more rational side of your brain to kick in and present those facts when you're trying to visualize and manifest this future that you truly, truly want?
So number one, you let them know that scientifically the genetics does not determine where they go. There is a huge lie out there that says, oh, it's my genes, I haven't got a chance, You can just say, do your research. They now know that that's not truth. All right. That's number one. Number two, the front part of your brain is the part that determines, like the smart brain, determines if you're safe or not. If it determines that you're not safe, it's going to pop you back into, it's like going from the living room to the kitchen. It's going to pop you back into that other part of the brain where now you're dealing with the emotional side of things, a fight, flight, or freeze. So yes, there is a struggle to override the smart brain because it thinks it knows everything. All right. So you have to give yourself permission to have fun. It's just like when I started doing artwork, I had to give myself permission not to be perfect, to have fun with, learning a new skill. It really is about giving yourself permission to learn a new skill and seeing what happens. Because when you shift the limbic brain, you then see the results of it. The results don't come before you shift. You have to shift. So you've got to give yourself permission to learn a new skill, just like working, out doing the reps and the barbells and the whatever. Okay. You need to give yourself permission to learn and build up the strength of working with the brain. Like I can do these mini little pictures in 5 seconds or less, probably closer to 2 seconds. I'll do these flashcards in my mind. All right. I couldn't do that initially. And in fact, I struggled with my smart brain going, well, that's not real because the timeline is, or the facts are. You just have to put that on hold and say, okay, I understand that, but we're going to work in the kitchen right now. We're going to work with the limbic brain. We're going to try a new recipe. We're going to experiment a little bit and just have fun. Like get out of the performance mode and just have some fun with your brain. And in fact, what works the quickest with my clients is I ask them to go into a cartoon mode because cartoons make you laugh. Cartoons aren't reality, and the brain knows it, but it's okay with cartoons because as kids, we grew up with cartoons. So cartoons work really well for many, many reasons to change how the brain is thinking about something, So for example, if you had somebody yelling at you, maybe you had an angry father or an angry school teacher, whatever, when you were a kid, if you cartoon their voice to Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse, it makes you laugh, it makes you smile. And if you tune it down, from loud to really small, your brain goes, hey, I like this picture, right? And the smile comes on your face and your front brain the smart brain doesn't interfere with the fun process. It likes it because your whole body is designed to keep you safe. Now, I want to address one thing. Back in the Stone Age days, you had to really be intuitive and listen to your intuition. And the negative, your body is designed to bring up the negative before the positive. So don't get discouraged when that negative thought or that negative picture comes up and screams in your face. That's just how your brain and your body has been designed. But you take as quick as you can and you slam a positive onto it. Your brain, it's like a train shifting tracks. Your brain will then go down the positive track. So you have to work at it. You have a muscle that has been built up since childhood, the pathway in your brain. And you just have to keep switching tracks, switching tracks. And the more you switch, the longer you stay there, the more you will go there and stay there until it's the primary track in your brain. So you just have to keep working at it and it'll come.
Yeah, I like that perspective that you have because I think so many people overly rely on that rational, analytical part of themselves. Maybe even, I mean, I think it really depends, but I find this more in men than I do in women. I think it's a little bit easier for women, but I think it also depends on the upbringing as well. But I feel like women at their center and at their core are maybe more emotional beings than men. And then men like to rely on this analytical and this rational and this like do kind of mindset. And everything can be worked out in my mind and all of this type of stuff. But what I like that you mentioned is that it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to be spending time there. Like you said, you have to tell yourself that, okay, we're in the kitchen right now. We're not in the laboratory, for example, right? So we're doing something completely different. And this, like bringing your, your mathematic tools to the kitchen doesn't make sense because it doesn't work here. So it's more about changing the environment and recognizing, okay, you need to use different tools whilst you're here. And the tools that help you in other stages of your life, like maybe you just need to put those down for a second. You don't have to put them down forever. You can still use them in your work life or whatever it serves you in. But I think a lot of people get so attached to them because they think they can kind of think their way through everything because of they've actually found a lot of success there as well. It's not only that, that's how they've learned to operate the world. They've actually found a decent amount of success. And that's why they're a little bit afraid to let go of those tools that have helped them so much. But obviously, when you look at it, it's been very one dimensional in terms of where it's helped them, right?
Yeah, like totally. You got it. You can't use a kitchen knife to try and brush your teeth with. You've got to switch
That'd be
tools.
messy, yeah.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, so no, exactly. So tell me more about that visualization and the mantras as well, because a lot of people, I did actually a little Instagram reel about this, and I said, I was making fun of people shouting themselves in the mirror. I was like, that's not going to do anything for you unless you're actually following up with something. But obviously the missing piece in that, obviously I'm very action based. I'm very much like your actions are going to create your realities. And I'm always very, very keen to tell people about that. Like it's nice to think and hypothesize about things, but when it comes to actually creating that reality, then I think taking action is always going to be the key. But I like the step that you've got behind that, which is visualization as well. So why is that such a major key for people to have success, and how can they start to manifest that? I can understand when an athlete envisions themselves scoring a goal, or they envision themselves crossing the line or standing on the podium. But for someone in their day-to-day life, what can they do to manifest the reality that they're after when it's not so easy to think of as crossing a finish line, for example?
Well, they first of all have to decide what they want to change. They've got to have something concrete. If it's like fog and you don't know where you're going, you're not going to change anything. You have to be very, very specific. So for example, I tied in doing deep knee bends to when I put my coffee in the microwave and it's, heating for, a minute 25 kind of thing. I've connected it to something, but it's very specific. My knees, I noticed, were getting weak when I was gardening. And so now I'm strengthening them. And I have no problem at this point because it was very specific. All right, what I wanted to target. So again, that's really the answer to your question is they've got to be specific. They've got to pull on the one thing. Is it the anger that they want to pull down? Maybe they're barking at their kids or their spouse too much. Well, that's a specific. Maybe it's the tiredness level. They're just exhausted all the time. That can be a specific if you look at, okay, what am I doing that makes me exhausted all the time? And is there something practical or tangible that I can work on? All right. So then you have the ability to deal with something. But if you're not specific, you cannot go there. It won't be effective.
And how often per day does this need to be done? Is this something where you need to sit down in the morning and close your eyes and spend some time thinking about where and what you want to be? Is it as simple as the thing that you did with heating up your coffee in the microwave? Like, is there a prescription to the optimal amount? Is there a skill to it as well? Can we get better at it as well? Maybe this is my thinking brain coming in, trying to optimize the performance, but give me more context on how we can implement it in an effective way so that it starts to help us a lot sooner than potentially if we didn't start at all.
So there's no magic number. I want to tell you that right now. What you want to do is you want to tune into your body. Your physical body is actually the first responder. It will tell you what's going on even before your emotional brain goes on. So, for example, when you go into emergency at the hospital, they won't ask you how you're feeling. They will ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your pain level? All right. They want to know specifically where you are physically feeling the pain, and you have to recognize before you change. So, if you are listening to your body, then the quantity is every time your body is saying, I am stressed or I'm going down that old pathway, is when you do those mental emotional pictures. Every time. All right. So initially you might be doing them quite frequently, but if you keep building the new pathway in the brain, building that railway track, okay, you won't have to go down as often. And once it goes from the short-term memory into the long-term, then that becomes a habit at that point, a habitual way of thinking and doing. So it really is, you listen to what your body or your, I'm going to say emotions, but really it's the physical body. So for example, I have a lady that I have worked with. She was in my course, the group course that I run, and she has seizures. She's had seizures since the age of 10. Lots of trauma in her background. Within, I think it was 1 month, maybe a month and a half. Okay, we met weekly. She is stopping her seizures from happening. Her seizure doctor is going, I like this, but what's going on? And all she has done is learn to tune into her physical body, recognize where the stress is, when the stress is hitting, and make a better choice. Has she done it perfectly? No, but I'm still in contact with her, and she has some major stressors going on. She has not seizured, which is like over the top phenomenal. But the key there was listening to her body and not overriding with, well, I'll just do it later. Or no, I haven't got time to do that. No, because this is a critical health issue, she has to learn to say, I have to do it now. I have to not push it, and delay it, because if she seizures, it can take her out for hours to days. All right. And that's with any health issue. If you want to really get on top of this, start listening to your body and the warning system. Your body's talking to you. It is talking to you, but are you listening? That's the answer to your question, is listen to what it's saying and course correct it with some healthy choices. If you need to just sit back for 2 minutes or 5 minutes and take some deep breaths, great. We're not talking about sleeping for a couple hours or going out for a run. A lot of people don't have that kind of time. But if you learn to do the mental imaging, you can learn to do it in seconds, pull down that stress, and then, keep going.
Yeah, I love that you just mentioned there, because I think that a lot of what my mind was going to is that sometimes I think that there's a temptation for people to start saying, well, I'm not feeling so well, so I'm going to go and take a nap in the middle of the day, which is not a bad thing. But if you're supposed to be in meetings, then it can be a little bit challenging with your life. Or if you've got responsibilities, for example, that need your attention and your time in that moment, then it's not going to lead to anything fantastic. Or if you decide to go out for a run, for example, when other things need to be done, and then you end up overwhelming yourself with all the work that you need to do, all the responsibilities as well. So I think it's nice where you said that these things don't have to be extensive or lengthy. And obviously you do need to give your body what it needs, but maybe there is a way to supply it with what it needs by just giving it a few seconds, a couple of minutes, a couple of breaths, and just taking a beat here or there, versus it being something that's very, very sophisticated and lengthy. And I think that that's a very, very big selling point to a lot of people, because a lot of people will literally say, well, I just don't have the time for all of that, like all of the emotional stuff. Like that's kind of the blanket they'll put on it. But the reality is it can be fit into a very short period of time, right?
Correct. And even for those that I'm not against, meditation, I'm not against going out for a run or, but those are time consuming. And like you said, if you're going into a meeting and the meeting is causing you stress and your body is shutting you down and there's a real cyclical nature to this, you've got to have some tools that you can quickly use. And so where there's stress then shifts you. If your brain, the analytical part of your brain says, oh, we've got some danger here, or we've got some concerns here, it's going to pop you back into that kitchen, that limbic area. All right. And now when you deal with the emotions, you have to deal with it not logically. You have to deal with it emotionally, but you don't have to do a nosedive into the emotions. You just have to learn how to unhook your brain so it doesn't escalate and go into a panic attack or anxiety attack. I work with people that literally they're on the verge of losing their job, or they've lost their job because of their health issues. They've had to step back, just similar to mine. And she was dealing with panic attacks, and we were working, and all of a sudden she goes, and I'm kind of going, oh no, what's going on? And she says, I can breathe. My anxiety's gone. I'm going, oh, thank God, smiling. We had unhooked her brain. I call it unhooking the brain. And when the brain in the limbic system released that emotional, it just affected her physically, emotionally. Her breathing got deep. And people with anxiety, shallow breathe. So when you get the right unhooked, it just, like I even worked with a lady with dental phobia. She'd had a really bad experience at a 3-year-old age, and she's now in her 70s. And every time she has to go to the dentist office, she's on a major panic attack. On a scale of 1 to 10, she's 155. All right, leaving claw marks in the dentist's chair. This is her description. Okay. And she was in one of my groups, and we unhooked it. And 2 days later, she went into the dentist's office as a normal adult. Like when you unhook the brain from the emotional trauma or triggers, it can be quite dramatic. In fact, the Mate Gabor, the doctor's book that I've been talking about on this, they have used medical systems to see how quickly this happens, and it shows that it's instant. Absolutely instant. Now, can it go back again? You know what? The dental person, I'm going to say no, but here's my but. So forget the first part and listen to the second part. She did have a small relapse, but was that the same issue, or was it similar with a different flavor? All right. I'm going to say it was the latter. And so again, we just walked her through those simple tools, reminded her of how to do it. And she was been fine going to the dentist office again. Again, she had an appointment. She went there. She didn't have to use the laughing gas, and she was just fine. So that is how quick and amazing this can be. Can it take a bit to find out what the root is? Yes. With the dental one, we started as an adult, didn't work. We walked back 2 or 3 times to the 3-year-old, and then we changed the picture of what the 3-year-old experienced. That's where we unhooked it.
Can you dive into that a little bit more, in the sense of how exactly you changed that picture? If you don't mind sharing her story. Obviously, I imagine it's very private to her, but talk to me exactly about what exactly happened and how you changed that story, and how the adult brain updated that as reality compared to the, I don't know, 5-6 decades of reality that she had up until that point.
Okay, so remember, the limbic system is going after 2 things, the emotional brain. It's going after safety, and it's going after trying to resolve the issue. So what we did with any of these pictures was we brought safety into her picture. So I asked them, it can be themselves as the adult. It can be, an angel, or, if they have a religious belief, a Christian belief, it can be Jesus. It can be whoever is a safe person for them. And you bring safety into the picture. Well, she saw her safe person being with her in the dental room. All right. So that's item number one, is safety. Number two is resolving the issue. So where her brain was going around and round, spinning and never being able to get off of it, which was causing all the anxiety, was we changed the picture then and got her out of the dentist room. I think that's how we did it on this one. I know it was some we get them out of the room. And so her safe person walked her, or it was just kind of like picture one, picture two, she's in, she's out kind of thing. But sometimes they can see them walking out of the room, and it's like your brain just goes, oh, I'm safe, and closes down on that trauma and allows you to shift the train track onto a new one because we've solved the problem and she's in a safe place. And that's how we did it, under 2 hours.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I don't want to underestimate her trauma, but let's say it's physical or sexual abuse that someone's gone through, and it's something that's deeply horrifying. I mean, I hope and I trust that the dentist wasn't actually trying to do anything bad to this lady. They were just trying to treat her teeth. But in some situations, people are doing things with malicious intent. So is it the same concept for those type of situations as well?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So with the dentist scenario, she was age 3, had to go to the dentist. It was a dentist that wasn't good with working with children. The parents had to hold her down so he could get the work done. Nothing sexual on that one. But I have worked with people with sexual trauma, and it's the same tools. So again, you bring in a safe person and you bring them out, you change the picture to safety. So in a situation that I'm thinking about, there was, and there's many good fathers out there. I'm not picking on fathers, but in this scenario that I worked with, it was a father, daughter issue. And so she had to bring a safe person in, but that safe person, actually, there's times when you can think what the picture will be, and there's other times when the picture will actually just change in your mind. And in hers, that's actually what happened. She started the picture, which was bringing the safe person in. So she's not alone with her father. And then that safe person put their arm around the father, talked to them in the ear quietly, like whisper, kind of like a whisper. She didn't hear what was being said, and walked them out of the room. So her, as a little girl, was safe. And because she felt physically safe, her brain released it.
Yeah, and obviously, let's be real and recognize that reality is technically a lie. Is there any issues with the deception of your mind? Obviously, I see it as advantageous, right? Obviously, you don't want the traumatic event to be impacting every single decision that you make in your life thereafter, which often it does. But at the same time, how does the mind navigate the deception when it kind of deep down knows the truth? You mentioned that the brain never forgets, so it's never going to forget how horrendous and visceral that felt. So how can we go about reframing it even when it's kind of more deception and a lie to ourselves? But even if it's a better story, it's still kind of deception in a way.
No, it's not. You have to think which room of the house you're in. Okay. So you're talking about the front room. All right. Which is the front of your forehead, the smart brain. That's all the logical facts. This is the truth of how things happen. Okay. The emotional is a totally different room. We'll call it the kitchen. All right. And it handles differently. The limbic system does not tell time. It doesn't know the difference between past, present, and future. That's why even with trauma, I used the example of an athlete before, but let me use it with a trauma victim. All right, the emotional brain is stuck in the past as if it's the present. So you can change the present by changing the picture of the past. Athletes use it to go forward into the future, but you can change the past just as easily as you can change the future. That's why I call it time travel. Okay. Which is really cool. And when you physically or emotionally feel the results of the release, some people do and can be quite dramatic. Other people, they don't. But they see that they're responding differently to things after the fact. They know that something has changed because sometimes it is a process. I'm working with somebody right now that it's a process, but you can see the demurrage changing. They're interacting differently. It's getting safer to connect with their emotions. They were very much a head person, all right? And there are things that are going to tell you that it's changed. So even though the logical brain will say, no, this can't be, the emotional brain will go, yeah, it is. but you will see things shift. You will feel things shift if something has shifted. And if it hasn't, like I worked with this young hockey player. He was age 14 at that time. He's 20 now. And his goal was to go to the NHL. But he kept tripping up with a belief system that he wasn't good enough. So we began to use visualization for him, and he kept, taking this one problem area that, let's say it was stick handling, and he began to see himself doing it good. And we got it. So he would describe what he had imagined. And then we started from that point and pushed it further. And we kept pushing it forward all the time. And he saw himself literally at the end experiencing being at the NHL. And he came out of that going, what his dad was, and it was amazing. But that's not an everybody experience. But in that situation, we just kept pushing the boundary further and further in the belief system. Okay, we were inching our way along. Others, you can come at it. So I have 5 fingers. I can come up from this angle. If that picture doesn't work, I'll come from here. If I only get a little measure, I'll come from a different angle. Like you just keep coming at it, chipping away at the root system until you get that root pulled. And that's when the logical brain will go, okay, I can't win on this. Something's changed, and your brain, and it'll let it go. There might be some confusion because it messes with your mind. It really does. Especially if you're a highly logical person. But if you're a person that has room for creativity and imagination, that kind of a person, then it works a lot easier. For those that are so, like, I worked with one client. She was actually a medical doctor, and she had no room for imagination. But that was how she grew up. She locked in her brain. There was mega trauma, and she could not get the train off the track. We actually, in that situation, she worked better with somebody else with a different methodology, So I'm not a be all end all for everybody, but I do work successfully with certain types of people. And I just say, try me, see what I'm like, let's see where it goes. And if not, I'll refer you on, or I'll probably know ahead of time if I can work with you or not, and refer you on even before you start. But it really is giving yourself the ability to try different people, different methodologies, see what works for you. Sometimes one thing will work for a partial measure, great. And then you find you can't get further, but you want to get further, go try somebody else. Try a different methodology. All right.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So spend more time in the kitchen with Dorothy and less time in the home office on your own. I think that's the
That's
summary
right.
of that. But no, I like it a lot. I think it's been very insightful, and I think it's been a nice reminder that not everything you need to think your way through. And sometimes, just like you mentioned just now, it's like just because we can visualize a future that hasn't happened yet, and that's not dishonest to our mind or our beliefs or anything along those lines, why is recontextualizing the past in a way that serves us? And ultimately, if we're doing it for the greater good of our future and our present as well, then what's wrong with that, to be completely honest as well? And Dorothy, I've enjoyed this conversation. I particularly enjoy your passion for this topic as well. I'm going to ask you a final few couple of questions. And the first is, what impact do you want to have on the world with the work that you do?
My passion is for women, and I want to see them have choices. That's my number one passion. Number 2 is I want to see them have their health and regain control of their lives. And it's possible even under difficult situations. They may not be able to change circumstances, but they can change how they handle it. That's the impact I want to have, because you do not need to go into major health crisis, and you will if you don't change some things for some people.
I love that. And where's the best place that people can find you if they want to keep up with the work that you're doing?
So the easiest place is my website, which is my name, dorothyjcook.com. You got to get the J in there because there's other Dorothy Cooks out there. Okay. So Dorothy is DorothyJCook. And then my course materials there, my book. I'm a best-selling author. It's there. It tells a little bit of my story. Like, everything's on my website. And there's a place to connect with me if you'd like to check in and see if I'm a good fit for you.
Super. I'll put that in the show notes below. But Dorothy, thank you so much for your time today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Elliot. Take care.